Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ASPM Magazine. Every company has a story to tell, from the small startup to the large enterprise, and everything in between. This is one of them. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Here we are. This is Sean Martin, host of the Redefining Cybersecurity podcast on ITSP Magazine. And I get to chat with all kinds of cool people who are at Black Hats as we cover many topics from the event and the surrounding activities, all at Hacker Summer Camp 2023. And we get to hear some brand stories from some organizations, some new, some old. This is a relatively new company who we've spoken to a few times. Good friends work there, and we get to meet and chat with Alex this time from Brinqa. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thanks.
And you're melting away, but not as much as you would be in your hometown. So you're in Vegas, kind of melting, but not nearly as much, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Very, very good choice of words.
An opportunity, a chance to unmelt later, I think.
Yeah.
But before we get into what you're hearing and the topic of application security posture management, let's find out a little bit about who Alex is and your role at Brinqa and what's going on.
Yeah. Well, so thanks. So for those listening, so I'm Alex Babar. I lead product marketing at Brinqa. Joined relatively recently. As Brinqa recently took a large round of funding in late 2021 to solve some big fun problems. We'll get to that later, though. Before that, I like to joke that I'm a 5 to 10-year-old in cybersecurity. And that's predominantly on the vendor side, kind of spanning product marketing, product management, kind of like solution management type roles. And it's been more on like kind of the startup scale up side of the world, just because like my kind of personal passion is like how do you bring cool technologies to market, that actually solve real world problems. And so that spanned across, I started identity and access management when for those of you that are in that space, like when customer identity was kind of becoming more trendy. Moved over to software supply chain security, application security, and then Brinqa found me, and I heard their story and I really bought in. And we'll get to some of this later, but based on my experiences so far on the AppSec side, just how noisy it really was. But yeah, like I think maybe Sean, if you don't mind, like just very quick, like 30 seconds on Brinqa for those unfamiliar.
Sure.
So the short version is that Brinqa is a SaaS. For those of you who don't know, Brinqa is a SaaS platform that centralizes all your vulnerability and security findings into essentially a unified graph database. And kind of the claim to fame is that this actually spans across infrastructure, cloud, and application security. The application security piece, I think, is the reason we're actually here chatting today, Sean. So I'll say some of that for later, but just I think that'll give everyone a good sense of kind of who I am, where I'm coming from, and what Brinqa does as well.
Yeah, and it's harder and continues to get harder to keep things separate. In the old days, perhaps you could keep an application separate from a system, and systems comprised of hardware and software and other elements that make it run. Of course, everything's together now, and especially when things are running in the cloud and API driven and data is all over the place and it's being generated with artificial intelligence. The scenarios and use cases are intertwined. So taking a single view is tough, but sometimes necessary to get into the nuts and bolts of it for that particular area, which I think is what we're going to do today. So we're going to look at app risk management and application security posture management. And let's start there, because I think folks probably know what security posture is and have spent decades trying to figure out how to increase and improve that. I would imagine application security posture management is similar objective with a special slice and view of the app stack. So maybe describe this space. So we have a baseline understanding of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I think you put it well. And like my running kind of joke, not joke in the space right now. It's ASPM are 4 letters that now my predictions for a variety of reasons we'll get into are going to become very commonly seen and heard. But the concept isn't really new. So like Sean, like you said, so application security posture management is exactly what it sounds like. But I think the details also matter. Like, well, why is it showing up so much? Like no joke. I was walking the floor yesterday at Black Hat, and besides the fact that it took me 3 hours to look at all the booths, like the amount of times I saw someone either say, application security posture, prioritize, correlate, like it was literally over 20 different vendors. And so Brinqa is obviously included in that. But, as far as like why, so you used a term earlier, app risk management. So really at the end of the day, there was, application security testing tools or detecting, vulnerabilities and weaknesses in your applications. But as, there's more and more different asset types, more and more different technologies, you have more and more different scanners testing for more and more different results. And it's kind of created its own problem of just, if I even only siloed application security, forget kind of the infrastructure and the cloud side of the world, I've got too much stuff coming from too many different places. So it's really just as simple as like, where do I put all that stuff kind of practically? But then for the security postures, I want to put it on the same spot, so to speak, so that I can then essentially correlate that to my actual business, my actual applications, my actual software products, to then understand the kind of that simple concept of what is the security posture of my application. That's probably enough for right now. But the reason I think it's trending is, so for those that haven't heard the term, but maybe the concept resonates. So Gartner in early May kind of placed their flag in the ground with they have a piece they do called Innovation Insight. That they start off at when emerging technologies, when they think there's a big enough market there that they need to support, right? So they came out with this is their new official term, for that concept. So if you've heard of, app risk management, vulnerability management for applications, it's all kind of the same thing. It's just now there's some specialness to the phrase ASPM and application security posture management, because now that's what kind of gained traction. So like the good of it is that there's now this term to use to communicate a concept in the same way, like that's great. The bad of it is it's just, it's right for now buzz and jargon, and, it's like going to be the next zero trust, before you know it.
Oh no, let's not do that. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
So typically if there's enough excitement and momentum behind some activity and some conversations. Now, Gartner, in fairness, they do talk to a lot of organizations and CISOs and security leaders in these organizations to kind of get a view of what they're struggling with, what they think they need in terms of solutions to these problems. So there must be something in there that warrants the new term, the new category, and kind of collapsing perhaps multiple things into one phrase that we can sling around. So what makes this unique? What are the pieces, parts that come together that give it a little extra oomph than all the individual pieces on their own?
Yeah, so I'd say, like, if you think about it in like the opposite direction of what's going on right now, it's essentially like security backlogs are just impossible, right? So it seems like kind of just the security world in general is realizing like it's not a get to zero, it's a what's posing the most risk, right? And so when you kind of flip that question over, okay, if I have X number of vulnerabilities and I know I'm going to essentially accept the risk of kind of the least risky, you start having a lot of, more serious questions on them. Like what product line are they associated with? Do we have any compensating controls in place? Are there any kind of compliance regulations tied to it, like PII or PCI or any of that sort of stuff? So one of kind of the key elements of ASPM is, so when you think of like, hey, a detection tool finding the actual vulnerability on the ASPM side. So this category of software is built to not only unify it, but then correlate that data with business context, threat intelligence, to essentially just score risk, but that's really just a prioritization mechanism, right? So you can now have let's put it this way, a documented approach to how you're planning to remediate the backlog, right? And the interesting part too, I think the documented piece is pretty important these days. Ever since for better or for worse,
Legal or forced to, yeah.
exactly. When I chat with CISO starting new roles, and they're worried about the legal language on being held personally liable for the risk the business is facing, like it kind of changes that conversation. Like the level of depth I want to be able to prove and understand to make sure that I'm doing what I can and we have capacity for here. But then even more than that piece, I think that's where one of the reasons right now, I was speaking to someone else, a literal quote they gave me, we were on a tear buying and then, with the macro headwinds coming in, analyze all that and kind of prove the value of what we're doing. And when it's too detached from business itself, the business units, it becomes just internally. So I think these are all kind of like the sword, if you will, that are kind of giving some for ASPM to rise up. But for it seems like some analysis on this, Gartner has it as well. It seems like it's pretty clear. It's we're talking about like current 5 or 10% of the market currently using this at this level of maturity, right? Like most folks by this time have their SaaS detection tools in place, their SCA detection tools, and the next iteration on that mature of, hey, now that we know all this stuff is here, get more sophisticated. And that's where the AS offering you the tool set to be more how you're actually handling and reducing the risk, not just particular vulnerability.
Yeah, so I want to maybe ask this because I think, to your point, I think organizations have matured over time and have processes and teams and tools looking at a lot of these things. How would you advise security professionals, be it practitioners or leaders, trying to navigate this new space? How do they figure out, well, where does this fit in? What changes do I need to make? What impact does it have on my program across those three things: people, process, technology?
Yeah, so I think some really good questions to ask is just at Brinqa we did a customer webinar with Assurion. They used the phrase, their security leadership team of self-identification. And as the story really resonated with me because essentially they're saying, they called it the hamster wheel. There's the hamster wheel of vulnerabilities. Hey, we're just continue to kind of make progress on the backlog versus asking the question, do we truly believe and know that we're actually reducing risk to the organization? And thinking of those as two different things. So one is kind of like, I'd say internal, like before the buzz or anything kind of catches your attention, just stepping back and asking yourself, if, and it's getting more topical now, like if the board or the CEO or some non-security executive asked me some simple questions, but hard to answer ones of which of my product lines are most, have the most risk associated with them from a security perspective, right? I think that's the opening. And then the rest is, I think there is a maturity, right? So there's steps. If you're not finding anything, if you're still investing in detecting, that's fair. But the way I liked this put to me from he's a CISO at a startup, kind of former Brinqa customer, was you always had to be mindful of the finding and fixing ratio. So like there's no point in, from his perspective, right? And then I think that every company's gonna have a different appetite of finding more and more stuff that I can't actually do anything with or do anything about. And that's also where I think in the last year, it's felt like, before folks have wanted to know about it, even if they couldn't act on it. And now it's almost becoming a liability, for better or for worse, to know about something and have no plan in place to do anything about it. Right. So I think that's where the kind of places that I would encourage someone to look, introspectively into their own organizations of just, like how much are we dealing with? How much progress are we making? How much risk is it actually reducing to the business? And if you end up with more questions than answers, and I think like that ASPM space, like that's a tool set that would start getting interesting for them, because you can see how like products were built to solve those problems. And then, at that point, it's off to the races on like technology. There's a big integration play. Like, does it fit? but we won't go into those weeds today. But I think, like, conceptually, folks will be able to appreciate that.
Yeah. So talk to me. I mean, because we have sliced off a silo here to dig in a little bit.
Yep.
But as I think we've both touched on, there's so much to the infrastructure that it's hard to keep things separate.
Yep.
And broader beyond just the infra is the operations as well. And when we start talking about apps and app security and security posture management, this isn't just like system security isn't just security's responsibilities, IT ops. When we look at apps, we have DevOps, and chances are they're running in the clouds. You have cloud ops. So how do you build an ASPM that takes those different ops parts to heart and actually promotes collaboration and a process that actually can help you actually close the gap on some of this stuff and raise that posture, right? Raise that bar. That's the goal.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I love that you brought the keeping things separate concept back up, because I heard you say in the beginning. I took a note because I wanted to circle back on it. But that's actually how Brinqa got into the space, like ASPM. So traditionally we helped folks, prioritize and, automate remediation and report on risks on their infrastructure. So think like, your Qualys Rapid7 tenable findings, right? Because so conceptually, tangibly from our customers, we started being asked, can we also do that for their, checkmarks findings, their sneak findings, their vericode findings, like that sort of thing, right? And essentially it turned into, hey, now fast forward, you said DevOps, but into like cloud native software development, the line between infrastructure and cloud and applications getting awfully blurry, right? The one thing I want to say though to your question is it does feel like there's an underlying challenge, because there are so many risks in the business, and there's no shortage of, like, I mean, if you're a black hat, you go through anyone that's gone through kind of that startup alley of new ways to just detect all this stuff, right? The hard-coded secrets in code, the misconfigurations in your CI/CD pipeline tools, like all this different stuff. But it's almost like, hey, if you go and implement that process in addition to what you already have, you're really just now creating more silos of more data, right? So I'd say, like, I kind of encourage like the ASPM thought to almost be like, hey, yes, there's a lot to be done, but everyone take a step back for a second and think, hey, would it be a good time to think about architecturally, should I think about kind of putting that all in one place so that I can get that macro level view, right? So I can see, hey, this is coming from the findings, see the picture of, hey, this is, coming from like operations, this is coming from the cloud, but also tying it back to the business to kind of stay out of the weeds. And what I mean by that is just so, it's easy to think in terms of assets and vulnerabilities, but, there's a difference between, the infrastructure as code script that's being used to, deploy my flagship product, and one that's being used to kind of deploy something in sandbox, right? Just from a prioritization perspective. So I'd say those are kind of like the foundational elements that we're seeing. It's there wasn't such a technology, and there wasn't enough findings to need the technology, 5 years ago. That's where it seems like we are now. It's almost like I think the question is like, when do you pause real quick on kind of finding more things and interject yourself into, hey, let's kind of create a little bit of a foundation to put all those things into that we can scale up on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And sets the stage for handling scope as it continues to grow over time, because chances are you're going to add more apps and do hybrid multi-cloud, and some on-prem and some public. I mean, it gets really nuts. So yeah, I think taking a moment to prepare yourself and to prepare your team and the flow of how you deal with this stuff, I think is super important. I want to touch on you said painting a picture and getting into the weeds. So to me, that's the executive view and the practitioner view of this, which are both important, but they have to come together and support each other in both directions. So let's maybe look at some of the conversations you've had at Black Hat as you're talking to folks. What are some of those executive level conversations like, and what are some of the practitioner conversations like? And do you see that connection between the two in a meaningful way?
Yeah. Yes and no. And so I think I want to kind of like put the caution out there on, ASPM, because of being the kind of hyped up term that it is, for better or for worse. And I do believe that there's something there. As you could hear from me, it's, not all tools are created equal. And so some of that has to do with scope, right? So you're talking about all things together. And just for context setting for the audience, so Brinqa primarily serves like larger enterprises, right? So folks that already have a bunch of kind of tooling in place and are looking to get that macro picture. The conversation we're having between the executive and practitioner level, though, is it's kind of twofold. So one, no matter how you slice all this stuff, inevitably it ends up in some report, that the CISO is presenting to, often like non-security stakeholders, right?
Yep.
And so as we know, that trend's getting, that report's going out to more senior now, is getting to board level in some organizations, right? So we think about the report, and so maybe that's the problem, but you have to unpack that quite a bit, and this is where kind of that practitioner element goes into, is how are those reports actually constructed today? It's like, well, I got to export snapshots of data from a dozen different tools and kind of like piecemeal stuff together via Excel pivot tables or Power BI. And so there's like the practical challenges of that, just how inefficient it is. But then also there's like the practical challenges of that from like a time lag perspective, because now you're reporting on snapshots of data and not kind of like continuous, slices of that data. And then it was interesting from a security perspective, we hear a lot. There's maybe some concern that, what's the source of truth? Once you've exported it and you have it in, now it's in Excel, it's like, well, what's actually the truth? And when you go up to, I say, like, what you're really trying to do is get more maybe resources or emphasis on remediating issues in an application. But when the development team is working in like, Jira, for example, and the security team's working in a different tool, like keeping those tools in sync creates its own problem. So if I'm the CISO and go to report and say, hey, I'm like banging my fist on the table, what aren't we doing about this? I lose a lot of credibility very instantly when it says, well, we already did something about it. Your tool's out of date, right? So there has been a lot of value in getting all this in one tool where you can go, I call it up and down. So you're building the reports, the executive level reports, but you can also think like click through the executive level reports to get down into the details. Because the problem with those executive level reports is they're not actionable for anyone that needs to actually remediate the issues, right? It's like, well, what specific asset, what specific vulnerability? Like you have to get down to that level. So I think that's where it's coming together, is having all that in one place, right? As opposed to just like it's spread across.
Right. Yeah, because let's not forget that the R&D team's having their moment at the executive leadership team meetings, telling their story, and if they're talking about how crappy the security process is and the impact it has on the CI/CD and delivery pipeline, that's not a good thing. Even if your security posture presentation is perfect.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this, and then this is, again, like I've been on the vendor side, but listening to our customers, kind of practitioners, what I hear, things like I hear, it's also on the security side, it's why would I make a big fuss about this new thing that popped out when I have, and I'm going to that meeting of, look, I have a lot of known critical vulnerabilities tied to an important application that are now out of SLA, right? So it's not just what do I need to remediate, where's my risk, but literally today, where do we focus our energy? Where do we focus the conversation? Yep. It's like, what's most urgent for the business. I've heard it phrased as kind of like next best action, So as I've seen it used kind of both ways, kind of strategically, are we doing something wrong? But also like more tactically, like, hey, I need to escalate this, and helping. And as I said, it helps usually it routes to a GM, of a business line.
Yep.
That's who maybe I need to appeal to.
Yep.
To a development resource to answer the question
exactly
of what SLA, if it is a critical thing.
Yeah. So on that note, I think the next best action here, I think we touched on it earlier, is kind of preparing yourself for what's to come. And so having a platform in place that has access to all this information and can pull it together in a meaningful way so that you can actually take multiple next best actions that not just keeps the team busy, but actually improves the application security posture as well as your overall security posture. I think that's the main goal. So next best action is to connect with you, Alex. And if folks are still in Vegas and they want to catch up, they should do that. Meet the team. Of course, beyond Hacker Summer Camp, there's always a way to connect with the Brinqa team, and we'll include links in the show notes for that. So Alex, it's been a great chat. Thanks for enlightening me on the new term and the new category and what it means. I think sounds like a good path forward to me to kind of set the stage and be prepared for what's coming.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Sean. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we do have a Brinqa booth at the Black Hat Hall. If anyone's here, I'll be there this afternoon. If anyone wants to come say hi, please do. I'll be staying in the AC.
Yes, stay cool. And thanks everybody for listening. Tons of great conversations here from Black Hat USA 2023, including this one here with our good friends from Brinqa. And stay tuned. There's lots more. I think at least a couple more conversations heading your way from Hacker Summer Camp. So stay tuned, subscribe, share with your friends, and comment if you have some ideas on the topics we're covering. Thank you, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.